clarification about that email I got last week.
Ron
Walsh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If those of you in class, if you don't mind getting started with the Pear Deck here. I just threw it up there. All right, for those of you in Zoom, I believe are you guys looking at a Pear Deck right now? Somebody give me a thumbs up or something. Zoom. Thank you, though. I appreciate you, too. I just got done with it. All right. Everyone list one thing they enjoyed about the weekend. It's been a while since we saw you. Anybody do anything fun? Nada? Doesn't seem like anybody did all week. Just homework? How much, what do you guys average outside of class time? What do you guys average homework each night? Yeah. Really? Everybody? That's crazy, man. That's way too much. Okay. Sorry about that. Sleeping, learning about all the trade. What trades, dude? Oh, yeah. My mind immediately went to sports, but that's good that you were actually doing something productive. Talking to friends, more sleeping, slept in, sleeping, went shopping, Minecraft and Call of Duty, nice. Nothing. I got a puppy. Who got a puppy? What kind of puppy? You can type it if you don't want to say it.
It was me. I got a miniature golden doodle.
Kimberly, what kind of puppy did you get?
A miniature golden doodle.
Those are cool. All right. All right. I guess we're not gonna find out what kind of puppy. That's sad. Okay. Let's get started then. They got a chat. The code is Aaliyah UGG Y or WYI. I will type it in the chat. Mini golden doodle, nice. Oh, your mic's not working, no problem. Sorry. All right, sorry, it's that second code I posted. All right, the development of absolute monarchies in Europe. Is there anything more exciting than that? So we're going to be talking somewhat briefly about these two characters right here and right here. The one on the right is featuring your reading. They're both featuring your reading for that matter. The one on the right, King Philip II of Spain. Many King Philips throughout history. This one is the King of Spain in the time we're talking about, so 16th, 17th centuries. He is a member of a very important family in European history and world history for that matter, called the Habsburgs. Philip the Habsburg king was in charge of much of Europe. The Habsburg family was. So at this time, obviously they didn't elect government. They didn't choose who were their rulers. They had rulers that were families of major houses, wealthy houses that had taken over time, and continued that royal dynasty through a couple of ways, one being war and the other one being way grosser in the form of intermarriage and marrying within your family to keep your family in charge. Exactly. So not uncommon for cousins to marry cousins, aunts to marry nephews or uncles, nieces. Very gross, but that's what they thought in terms of the divine right of kings to keep their royal bloodline pure. So much so, there's a picture of Philip here, which I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but so much so while we're talking about interbreeding, this right here, as everyone will notice, this very prominent jawline was known as the Habsburg jaw. It's very it's very gross. The reason it's gross is the Habsburg jaw now is thought to be the result of that interbreeding. So this is a very prominent feature in a lot of Habsburgs at the time. Going back a little bit, this Queen Elizabeth, very important, very popular, very effective ruler, monarch during the time that she reigned. Happens to be on the front of your textbook. That should tell you how important she was. She was a member of the Tudor family, which I believe Mr. Brunette said you guys have talked about in the past. Her father was King Henry VIII, who famously pulled the Church of England, or the England out of the Catholic Church, created the Church of England. Also, he could marry his mistress and get a son through her. Huh? I don't know a lot. How many? 42 wives, according to Ava. That's not a low number. That's a lot of wives. 6? Oh. So 6 actually? Oh, okay, I was like 42 sounds like a lot. Maybe mistresses and everything. 42 definitely sounds more likely. So we're going to get into the relationship between these two, but they're not just two random rulers. The Habsburgs were in charge of quite a bit of Europe. In fact, quite a bit of the world at this point through the Spanish Empire. First things first, though, Philip was a militant Catholic. Militant Catholicism meaning that they viewed themselves as ordained by God, as the chosen people, if you will, to give the correct way to follow Christianity, to pursue Christianity, and they felt it was their job to impart that on the rest of the world. They did this to save Protestant heretics. Protestant heretics to go hand in hand. This is the Catholic view of Protestants. Anybody that's non-Catholic is going to be considered a heretic. The words kind of survive to this day. It's not as strictly used as it was, but that was the goal of King Philip, of the Catholics at the time. The militant Catholicism that was imparted, particularly on the Netherlands, was not well received, as you can imagine. If somebody, some ruler, some king is trying to tell you in your country and your noblemen how to live and how to rule, it's not going to go well. Excuse me. So his attempt to crush Calvinism caused resistance, which we'll get into in the next couple slides. And then finally, Queen Elizabeth, she and him have a little bit of a past in terms of he was married to Queen Elizabeth's sister. half sister at that. So Queen Elizabeth's sister, Mary, at the bottom here, sister of Mary Tudor, was Catholic. They wanted to create a Catholic dynasty in England. Philip wanted Catholicism to rule England and really the world if it were up to him. And when Queen Elizabeth took over, she had to deal with a lot of the problems of the laws that her sister had put into place before she took over. So, militant Catholicism. As we've said, Philip's Catholic. He is known as the, quote, most Catholic king. He is the son of Charles V, who you might remember from your time talking about Martin Luther. He was the Holy Roman Emperor, the King of Spain, and the Archduke of Austria all in one. That is why the intermarrying was so important, so they could consolidate these powers so they could be in charge of many areas at once. Former husband of Mary Tudor, as we just said, who's Queen Elizabeth's sister. When Charles V, when Philip's father dies, Philip is granted the lands of Milan, Naples, and Sicily, which were all in Italy as we know it today, the Netherlands, Spain, and the empire in the Americas, as we talked about last week with our mercantilism, slave trade discussions. That is what Philip was in charge of. So we have a vast, vast empire. And as we'll see, and as we mentioned, he insisted on strict conformity to Catholicism. If you didn't, it would meet a military response. He led the Holy League, which is a group of Catholic nations, against the Turks in a victory, which was probably his largest victory as a dictator, or as a monarch, excuse me. All right, so a little review. We just talked about this. In Philip II's mind, were Protestants heretics or not heretics? Drag the dot in the correct spot. All right, looks like most of you are leaning, some late switchers. Looks like most of you are leaning the right way. Protestants, anybody that wasn't a Catholic was a heretic. So Philip absolutely would have thought a Protestant was a heretic. All right, so we have two maps here. This is the Spanish Habsburg house, Habsburg family, empire under Philip II. At the time of Philip II, everything in red is the Spanish Habsburg's empire. Obviously, all the Americas, parts of Europe, which are highlighted down here, the Northwest, as well as the West Coast of Africa, which is part of that triangle trade we talked about last week, and then the Southeast Asia over here, what is now known as the Philippines. And if you look at the name of the Philippines, I bet you can guess how they got it. That's right, Philip. So Philip in charge of the Philippines, all this other area as well. If you look down here, anything in this dark orange, it's kind of somewhat tough to see, I guess. Anything in this dark orange, Spain, Portugal, Netherlands, Naples, Sicily, all this area is ruled by the Habsburgs, is ruled by Philip, is under his domain. So what I'd like you to do is write your response. What do you think is the problem, or what problems do you see with the area that Philip has in charge of? What could you foresee as an issue here? Especially as a Catholic that wants everyone else to be Catholic or wants to rule other lands. Good, good, good. Very good. All spread out, all chopped up. It's all everywhere. A lot of lands and with a lot of beliefs. That is a very big ocean as well. The ocean's a big part of it. I mean, to be able to control this land with the empire in place, especially at this time with this technology, incredibly difficult thing to do. That doesn't mean Philip isn't going to try, though. So militant Catholicism, there is trouble in the Netherlands. As I talked about a minute ago, Philip attempting to exert his control in these areas didn't sit well, especially with the nobles of these areas. Caused frustration, caused resentment, and then eventually, as you see in point 2 here, it caused violence in 1566 to break out. This war, as most wars are, was very bloody, very violent. Philip sends 10,000 troops to crush this rebellion and doesn't really succeed. The Dutch are led by William the Silent, and it does not end until 1609 when a 12-year truce is introduced. At that point, the northern provinces of Spain declare themselves as an independent colony, or an independent provinces rather, United Provinces of Netherlands. This begins the golden age of the Netherlands and the Dutch Republic in general. So type your responses, please. In person, if you want to speak up, that's fine too. Why was Philip II interested in keeping the Spanish Netherlands? Think religion, think government, think mercantilism. One thing I did not touch on as well as I should have a minute ago as well is not only was this a religious deal, but what do most wars revolve around? I mean, even to this day, why do most places want to go to war with other places? David, you have an idea? Money. Money is the best answer. Money is a big deal. It's a big deal now. It's a big deal then. Money is important in the war against the Spanish Netherlands because at this time, it was estimated that the Dutch Republic, they brought in 7 times as much money as all of the Americas combined did. So the port that they had in the Netherlands was highly, highly profitable to the Spanish Empire, to Philip. So not only was religion important, but also money was very important, and the Dutch had a lot of it. Hence why also the Dutch wanted to be free. I mean, if you have a republic, if you have an area of like-minded people that are making enough money to survive on their own, they don't want anybody telling them how to live and telling them what they need to do. All great answers, a lot of really good answers. Those are just 3 of the ones that touch on both of the things we just mentioned. All right, so moving on from the Dutch, from the Netherlands, moving on to Queen Elizabeth, who was, as it says here, intelligent. She was careful. She was self-confident as well. She probably got that a little bit from her father, who was overly confident, overly violent, and overly promiscuous as well, as we touched on a little bit ago too. A lot of mistresses, a lot of wives. But Queen Elizabeth inherited these religious problems from her sister Mary, who was a Catholic, instituted a lot of Catholic laws that benefited the Catholics, not the Protestants. So she, when she got into power, reversed these laws, and in terms of absolute monarchy, declares herself the supreme governor of both the church and the state. So the thing about her being a supreme governor, most times that's not a great thing. Obviously, this isn't the time in history where they're going to be talking about a more fair system or elected officials. But her version of it was fairly moderate, fairly good for the time. So she had moderate Protestantism as well as a moderate foreign policy. And when we bring up foreign policy, what does that mean? When I say a country's foreign policy, what are we referring to? You can type it. Obviously, there's a text response here too, if you'd rather type it. Yeah, that's a good point. What's the difference between the foreign policy and domestic policy as well? It's a good start here. Rules and deals with other countries. Elizabeth, very good too. How to deal with other countries. Yeah, it's how a country deals with other countries. To this day, we talk about United States foreign policy, different people's or different countries' foreign policies, and how they deal not only governmentally, but in this time religiously and in terms of economically, in terms of money, how we deal, how we affect the rules of others. So the Spanish Armada, Queen Elizabeth, as we see here, was very moderate, tried to keep Spain and France from becoming too powerful. If one started getting powerful, she would support the other and vice versa. So she feared that any direct war with Spain or with France head to head would not be good for England or her rule for that matter. So her solution to that was a moderate policy, trying to stay out as much as possible and not get involved. Philip, on the other hand, does not feel the same. Philip is very militant, very straightforward, and wants to control everything. So he makes preparations to send an armada being a fleet of ships, talks about it in your book. And a successful invasion to him would mean a return to Protestantism, a return to Catholicism in England, and in turn for him, more control of Europe and his Habsburg dynasty. Unfortunately, the fleet that set sail didn't have the ships or the manpower that he wanted. They were fighting wars in France. They were fighting wars in Spanish Netherlands, as we just said. They didn't have enough people. So the hope for victory never came. Armada was battered by two things. One, faster English ships, and two, an act of God, as people would see it back then, the weather. As my artistic skills here would point out, this is supposed to be the Spanish Armada, sinking with that Habsburg jaw into the ocean, storms raging above it, and then on the northwest part of the UK here, but England at the time, where Scotland and Ireland are. So this is a good way to remember what exactly happened to the Spanish Armada in the end. By the end of Philip's reign, Spain was still considered a major player on the world scheme, but they were bankrupt. They had the most people in Europe, but they had no money. Philip spent too much money on war. His successor spent too much money on his court, and they were not successful because of it. Spain, even though they continued to play the role of a great power, the actual effect of it had shifted from them to England and France. So Elizabeth's policy of being moderate and careful and intelligent pays off. All right, closing up here, couple review questions. In the Catholic Church's mind, a Calvinist was what? A heretic or not a heretic? Calvinist being a Protestant denomination, bear in mind. All over the board. All right. Most of you got it though. Absolutely a heretic. Anybody that wasn't Catholic was going to be considered a heretic. So Calvinists included. All right. What defeated the Spanish Armada? Was it faster English ships? Was it the weather? Or was it a little bit of both? I think every single person got it. Awesome. Yeah, it was a little bit of both. It's most importantly at this time, when I say act of God, keep in mind what was happening. I mean, this was a religious war. So when the weather controls what happened to these people at this time with their knowledge of how the world worked, that wasn't just the weather happening to do that. That was God choosing a side of the Protestants being the superior force, being the correct ones when it came to Christianity as opposed to Catholicism. So when it, especially faster English ships is one thing, but especially when God chooses to grace the Protestants with the win, with England with the win, these people for centuries view this as a sign that God was in support of the Protestant cause, of the English cause, especially in England. All right, and so lastly, which of these empires is the most populous rather, but also bankrupt. They had no money or very little money, and they spent too much on it. Good. All right. Yeah, most of us got it. Spain, Philip spreading out the wars, spreading out his army, spending too much silver, and not getting enough in return. So Spain is the correct answer. They needed more moderation and more balanced policy. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? Me and Mr. Burnett have talked about this material in general, and I can tell by all your faces, it's not the most exciting material in the world. It's a whole bunch of like kings did this to this person, to a queen that did this to that person. It's a lot all over the place. So bear that in mind. I mean, as Mr. Burnett pointed out last period, like if you're interested in this stuff outside of the internet, like European AP history is like where you would actually get into what this is about. For our purposes, we're just kind of do the broad strokes and do the as much as we need to get the picture, but not to get in depth with it. So bear that in mind. I know it's not the most colorful material. That being said, with the rest, unless there's questions or anything, with the rest of the class period, with the intros this week being definitely on the end of longer and taking more time, we're going to spend the rest of the class period with independent work, and we're going to go back into the intros, go back into the readings, and finish that up by the end of the period, ideally. So go ahead and switch over to Canvas or get the readings and get the intros going. And let me know if you have any questions or comments, concerns.
Can we leave?
I got off of Zoom to do computers at the time, and I realized.
Oh yeah, it's right there. Sophie brings up a good point on the chat. If you're done with your intros, you can log off of Zoom. If you're not, I prefer you stay on. Yeah. Yeah, we have 13 total in all three classes, right? Yeah, so pretty much everybody is, I know Sophie, I did see yours, but pretty much everybody needs to be working on it.